This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
What's up? Say wagwan. This is Babylon Makes the Rules. I'm Dr. Negus, Rudison Imhotep. I'm also the CEO and principal consultant for Rudison Consultancy Group, LLC. RCG is a recruitment marketing firm that connects Central Iowa's top employers with highly skilled untapped talent and assists job seekers in securing gainful employment. Additionally, RCG, we postulate cultural strategies, equity audits, a rigorous cultural competency training, and historical insight for corporate partners. I'm here to tell you today, as well as being the cultural principal consultant, I am also licensed and certified with the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy as an instructor when it comes to African and African American perspectives. So how's everybody doing out there in the media world? It's Friday and it's before noon, so it's still morning time. I'm here today to talk to you about a topic that is heavily on the scenes in the society. And today's topic, I'm going to be talking about racism. Race and racism. And to simplify the meanings of race and racism. Well, as we see today in society, we know that racism is intertwined throughout the fabric of this nation. We see issues that have happened recently from 3 years back to the George Floyd, to the numerous different occasions where people of color have been beaten, killed, and incarcerated for issues that really pertain to race. We see what happened in Montgomery, Alabama just a couple of weeks ago with the Alabama brawl. People all getting excited about certain things, but it's nothing to get too crazy about short win, little small victories, or what we think are victories when we're dealing with a systemic problem. I wrote this paper a couple of years ago. It's a little short paper, about 3 pages, and it deals with race and racism simplified. And I'm going to read it to you. The purpose of this construct is to elaborate on a qualifiable as well as a quantifiable definition of the term racism. Scores of individuals are familiar with this word, yet many attempt to utilize the term in conversations. But do we categorically comprehend the true meaning of the term? Primarily, race is a social construct engendered by the white power structure based on shared physical or social qualities into groups generally viewed as distinct within a given society. Race, human categorization, was predicted on the premise that collective physical and social qualities in groups are commonly considered distinct within a given society. The term originated in common practice during the 16th century, when it was used to refer to groups of various kinds, including those categories by close kinship relation. Racism is a philosophy that one ethnic group is condemned by nature to inherit subservience and another group is destined to inherit preeminence. One should not misconstrue discrimination or implicit or explicit bias with the definition of racism, yet the terms are a byproduct of racism. From a historical basis, Count Arthur de Gobineau in 1816, he was born in 1816 and he died in 1882. He was a man who was frequently categorized as the father of racism. Of course, no one individual is exclusively responsible, but he's one of those who influenced and supported the fortification of the racist philosophy. From 1853 to 1855, de Gobineau's racist pseudo-scientific manuscript, he wrote an essay entitled The Essay on the Inequality of the Human Race. He contends that there is literal variance amidst human races, that civilizations deteriorated and collapsed when races were intermingled, and that the white race is superior. Antenor Furman in 1850, he was born in 1850, he died in 1911. Antenor Furman, he was a Haitian lawyer, an Egyptologist, a philosopher, pioneer anthropologist, journalist, and a politician. And in 1885, Furman published his manuscript on the equality of human race, a rebuttal to the pseudoscience literary composition by de Gobineau. Furman's book claimed that all men are bestowed with similar potentials and similar imperfections, devoid of distinctions of the color or bodily form. The races are equal. He was marginalized at his time for his belief that all human races were equal. So we go over to the English person herself, Merriam-Webster, looking at the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines the term racism as a systemic as a systemic oppression of racial or ethnic groups for the social, economic, and political advancement of another. Postulated are imperative components of the terms discussed. There are levels of racism. The first degree of racism is the most well understood, dimensions involving actions that people of color view as overtly prejudiced. Example, policing black citizens much differently than whites, calling the police on a black bird watcher in Central Park, asking you to obey the laws. Calling somebody the N-word to show them who's the boss. That's the first degree racism. Second degree racism is when there's opposing or turning one's back on anti-racist efforts, often justified by the demonization of the people courageously tackling racial behavior. The third degree of racism is, how did we miss that? What? How did we miss that? This dimension of racism is particularly hard to root out because many of our most enlightened white leaders do not even realize what they are doing. This racism is the third degree, akin to involuntary manslaughter. We're not trying to hurt anyone, but we create the condition that shatters everyone else's future aspirations. Noted Dr. Francis Cress Welsing opined that injustice caused by racism will end when, let me restate that. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing opined that injustice caused by racism will end when non-white people worldwide recognize and analyze and understand and discuss openly the genocidal dynamics of racism. Racism, white supremacy, is the local and global power system and dynamics structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perceptions, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people's activities, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast majority of people are classified as non-whites, black, brown, red, yellow, by white-skinned people and all of the non-white people who genetically are dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to genetically recessive white-skinned people. People who classify themselves as white who wish to be taken seriously, are righteous and responsible, will only talk about ending white supremacy racism and replacing it with justice. For further understanding, I have some books listed here and some articles to read. First one is The Crest Theory of Color Confrontation, Racism and White Supremacy. It was written in 1970. Also, The ISIS Papers, The Keys to Color by Francis Cress Welsing, Third World Press. According to Welsing, the cause of these issues is white supremacy. White men's race to the top. Black men are at the center of Welsing's discussion because, according to Welsing, they have the greatest potential of causing white genetic annihilation. Crest Theory of Color Confrontation, TCC, is premised on genetic and numeric deficient factors. According to Welsing, white supremacy is a conscious or unconscious psychological response to white genetic and numeric deficiency. On a global scale, people who identify as white are a numerical minority. Welsing articulates the importance of power in the implementation and elimination of racism. Welsing posits that people who have the ability and means or power to eradicate racism do not have any intention or will or desire to end it, and the people who have the need and want and the desire to end racism do not have the ability or the power. That was a mouthful. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Here's another individual. The late Harvard University law professor and the progenitor of the critical race theory, Dr. Derek Bell. He posits that black people will never gain full equality in this country. In his manuscript, Racism is Here to Stay Now What? Opines that unfluctuating individual phenomenal endeavors we address as fruitful will harvest no more than transitionary principles of improvement, short-lived triumphs, and fall into unimportance as racial examples alter traditions that maintain white dominance. The critical race theory. For you who really want to know what the critical race theory is, and not just to hear the hoopla that you hear on the media. As in regards to the critical race theory, or CRT recognized that racism is deeply rooted in the composition and arrangement of American society. The distinct races need not endure mentioning that institutional racism is omnipresent in the governing culture. This remains the investigative lens of the critical race theorists who use CRT to research current power structure. CRT ascertains that these power structures are founded on white privilege and white supremacy, which disseminates the ostracism of people of color. The parent racists need not endure mentioning that institutional racism is omnipresent in the governing culture. This remains the investigative lens used to research the power structure. CRT views racism as a persistent and even permanent feature in politics, education, corporations, popular media, sports, and the criminal justice system. CRT values the experimental knowledge of members of historical groups. CRT posits that liberal values of meritocracy, objectivity, neutrality conceals the power and privilege of members of dominant groups. CRT posits that racism, instincts, and other forms of oppression. Let me restate it that my eyes got twisted. CRT posits that racism is intersected other forms of oppression. CRT draws on the extinct tradition and methodology to offer transformative response to racism groups. In conclusion, racism is a global pandemic affecting all, and the power elite has no intention of developing a vaccination for this catastrophic dilemma. That's something I wrote 3 years ago about racism. We're here to come to understand that we, as a body, as a unit, need to come and realize that we have all different forms of people on this planet, and one culture is not superior to another. For us to work together and live in harmony, we must come to a realization that we're all human, or if you're not human, you come from another planet, and you're really what alien is. Someone from, or some being or body from another planet, because we're all here on this planet, all human race. If you have any questions in regards to what was spoken today, I listed some books and authors. Francis Cress Welsing, the ISIS Papers, Francis Cress Welsing, Cress Theory of Color Confrontation, and Dr. Derek Bell, Critical Race Theory, Progenitor, wrote numerous books, but one of them, one that I liked the most was called Racism is Here to Stay. Now What? And it's just pleasant and beautiful day. I felt that this was necessary because we look at the social and political environment that we live in today, and looking at issues within the church, looking at issues within the government, and people need to come to grips. We need to sit down and communicate with one another. Well, we as a body of people on this planet, we need just to have a big family reunion where everybody can sit down and eat some barbecue and conversate and get their points across without people going to arms. Because from my perspective as a sociologist and also as a religious, not a religious, but I'm going to say a spiritual person, we don't need no tribal wars. We don't need another civil war in this country. I'm going to say it again. We don't need another civil war in this country. So people, because someone's different from you, don't turn your nose up at them. If you have the time, and when you get a time, stop and try to have a conversation. You might find something out that you didn't know. You might even make a friend. This is Dr. Negus Imhotep coming to you with much information. Until next time, bye now.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates and central Iowa companies.